There was a morning. My son called in panic, saying that all the bank cards had been frozen. He didn't know it was me who did it. For 10 years, I lived like a talking wallet, a mother love only on condition. And that day, between the tears and accusations, I realized something heartbreaking. In their eyes, I was no longer a mother. I was a credit card in human form. But you know what? That very same day, I began to truly live for the first time in my life. I still remember the first morning after Leonard passed away. The house was silent like a church. The only sounds were the faint hum of the refrigerator and the uneven ticking of the wall clock. I sat at the kitchen table staring out at the front yard where he used to tend his rose bushes, thinking the rest of my life would pass quietly. I had a small pension, a house with no mortgage, and 2 grown children. I thought that was enough. But peace is as fragile as the foam on a cold cup of coffee. My son Marcus, 32 at the time, had just been laid off from a tech company. Just a few months, Mom, he said, his voice caught between shame and pride. I'll find another job soon. I nodded, my heart swelling with sympathy. I'd raised him in a tiny apartment in South Atlanta, working 30 years as a nurse. I knew the despair of an empty wallet, so I didn't hesitate to dip into my savings, helping him cover his $200 rent. Just a few months, I repeated as if those words were a promise written in heaven. Those few months stretched into 8. And when Marcus finally found work, a temporary sales position with unreliable pay, he said, Mom, I'll pay you back when things settle down. I smiled. There was nothing to pay back. I was his mother after all. The following year, Tasha, his wife, told me she needed a more professional image to earn a promotion. Tasha worked at an advertising agency, always dressed like she'd stepped off the pages of a magazine. A few suits, some good shoes, a proper handbag, she listed breezily. 3,000 should be enough, right, Mom? $3,000, nearly what I'd set aside to fix the roof. But I couldn't say no. Black women in that world have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously, I thought. I understood. I'd been that girl, wearing a patched nurse's uniform, enduring the condescending stares of young white doctors. I didn't want Tasha to face that, so I swiped my card again. I thought love could buy respect. When they mentioned a well-deserved trip to Hawaii, I nodded once more. $5,000 disappeared from my account, like a leaf in the wind. Mom, you're not coming with us? Marcus asked, sounding slightly guilty. Tasha wants this to be a private getaway. You understand, right? I understood. I always did. At family dinners, they'd tell stories of blue oceans and golden sand, and I would smile, hiding my freckled hands under the table. I had never seen the Pacific Ocean outside of a TV screen, but it was fine. My son was happy, and that was enough. Then came a safe car for the kids' future. They picked out a shiny new black SUV packed with every feature imaginable. We just need your help with the down payment, 15,000, Mom, Tasha said sweetly, while Marcus looked at me with those same pleading eyes he'd had at 10 years old. I sighed and signed the check. For the family's future, I told myself, feeling as if I were doing something sacred. But in the nights that followed, as the neighbors' lights went out, one by one, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by a nameless emptiness. They never invited me to those fancy dinners I was paying for. Mom doesn't like loud places, Marcus would say. I'd smile. Right, I'm too old for that. I lied. I still loved laughter, the smell of wine, the softness of jazz. I just didn't belong in their world anymore. Gradually, the emergencies became routine phone bills, credit card payments, cleaning services, even premium gym memberships. I don't remember who first suggested adding a supplementary card for them, only that soon after strange transaction appeared like summer rain. Every month, hundreds of dollars vanished into things I'd never heard of: Hulu Premium, Fit Trek Pro, luxury reads monthly. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I was afraid of the answer, afraid it would make me feel foolish for trusting too much. I began to shrink my world, no fresh flowers, no salon visits, no brunch with old friends. Every time I thought about spending money, I heard Marcus's voice echo in my mind. Mom, things are tight right now. So I cut back again. Once, my old nurse friend Charlene invited me to an outdoor concert. I said I was busy, but the truth was, I didn't want to spend $50 on a ticket. After hanging up, I stared at my thin wallet and realized that I, the woman who once taught her son not to live off others, was now supporting two grown adults with her retirement money. I never told anyone. In our community, especially as Black women, we're taught to be strong to take care of everyone else, even when our backs are breaking. My blackness has to carry your whiteness, my mother used to joke half seriously. Those words followed me my whole life. I comforted myself with the thought that I was lucky at least Marcus wasn't into drugs or gambling. He was just trying to live better. I wanted to believe that. But one afternoon in March, while reviewing my account, I froze $86,000 gone in 5 years. Each withdrawal, each payment laid out before me, like evidence in a courtroom, a number that spoke for itself. I remember sitting there for a long time, staring at the glowing screen, my hand trembling on the mouse. Outside, I could hear the neighborhood kids laughing, their voices so pure it made me want to cry. I never thought love could be spent, but clearly my trust was running dry. That evening, Marcus stopped by. "Mom, the card got declined today. Must be a bank glitch," he said with an awkward smile. "Tasha wanted to book a table for you at this new restaurant as a thank you." I looked at him, the same boy who once cried into my chest when his father died now, with tired eyes shadowed by calculation. "It's okay," I said softly. "I still have some cash." I handed him a few bills. "Don't forget the receipt." He smiled, thanked me, and left. The door closed behind him, leaving only the faint sound of the TV and my heartbeat echoing in the room. That night, I stared into the mirror for a long time. Salt and pepper hair, sun-worn skin, wrinkles around my mouth. I barely recognized the woman staring back. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of fatigue and quiet shame. I remembered what my mother once said: "You can help them, but don't let them forget to be grateful." I'd let Marcus forget, and maybe I'd forgotten my own worth too. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I'd become an interest-free bank, open day and night, for the people I loved. They'd withdrawn every ounce of trust, every dollar of respect, and I hadn't even noticed when my emotional balance hit zero. I didn't hate them, I just felt empty. I missed the nights at the hospital when patients called me Nurse Monroe with gratitude in their eyes. I used to have value. I used to matter. Now in my own home, I was just the name printed on their credit card. And when that truth finally sank in, something inside me began to crack quietly, but beyond repair. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped believing my son still saw me as his mother. It wasn't some sudden blow, it was a slow, bleeding process that took years. But that day on a humid Saturday afternoon in June in Atlanta, I brought coffee into the living room, and within a few brief seconds, every illusion I'd been holding on to melted away like mist. Marcus and Tasha were hosting some of their friends' young faces, light-skinned, loud laughter, fast talk, all about new restaurants, startup projects, and trips to Europe. I didn't understand half the words they used, but I smiled anyway, pouring coffee. I brought out a tray of cookies, setting it gently on the glass table. The air was thick with expensive perfume and espresso, so refined it made me feel out of place, like a servant in my own home. Tasha turned to a blonde friend and said lightly, "Oh, don't worry. Money's never really an issue for us. We've got our own private bank, Mama Bank." The group burst out laughing. I froze. Marcus laughed too, nodding in agreement. "Exactly. Mama Bank, no interest, no loan denied." Another woman chimed in, "God with a mom like that, who even needs a second job." Laughter filled the room, crisp and bright like ice cubes clinking in glasses. I stood there, coffee trembling in my hand, a few drops spilling onto the carpet. I heard Marcus say something else, probably another joke, but my ears buzzed. For a moment, it felt like I was watching from a distance, a brown-skinned, silver-haired woman standing in a spotless room where everything from the sofa to the crystal glasses had been bought with her money. And yet she was the punchline. I turned away, holding back the trembling in my hands, and walked into the kitchen. The door closed behind me, but their laughter still bled through the wall. I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. No one in that room knew I'd heard. No one noticed I'd left. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, something else crept in, not sadness, but coldness. Cold like metal. I washed the dishes one by one, listening to the running water as if it could drown out their laughter. But the words kept echoing, "Mama Bank." They hadn't said mom, not Angela, just a financial institution, a money machine with a heartbeat. That evening, after everyone left, Marcus came into the kitchen. "Thanks for the coffee and cookies, Mom," he said, rummaging in the fridge for a beer. I replied quietly, "Tasha's a funny one." "Yeah, she was just joking. Don't take it to heart." I smiled faintly. "A joke, huh?" "Yeah, Tasha, her mouth's faster than her brain. And you laughed too." Marcus paused, looking uneasy. "Mom, we were just teasing. Why are you taking it so seriously?" I didn't answer. He watched me for a moment, then poured his beer and left. The door closed. The TV came on. I sat there alone for a long time. The smell of cold coffee lingered on my sleeve, bitter as ash. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the cicadas outside the window, replaying all the years of raising my son. I remembered waiting up with him over homework, the first pair of sneakers I'd bought after a week of night shifts. Every memory rolled by in slow motion. And I asked myself, what did I teach my son that made him think his mother was a bank? I stayed awake until nearly 3. The initial storm of pain, shame, and anger slowly gave way to a dry, piercing clarity. I realized that over the years I had built this trap myself. Every "it's okay," every forced smile, every time I opened my wallet, I had hammered another nail into the door that locked me inside the role of the mother who endures. When dawn broke, I got up, brewed coffee, and turned on my computer. The cold blue light reflected my tired face. I opened my bank account, saw the list of linked cards, joint accounts. 5 active cards, 2 Visas, 1 MasterCard, and 2 shared debit cards. All under my name, all steadily being used week after week. I moved the cursor over cancel additional card. I paused not out of hesitation, but to remember this feeling. Then I clicked, click. 1 card disappeared, then another, then a third. I kept going, each click light as a breath, but with every one a chain snapped loose. When I finished, I felt hollow, but lighter. Next, I closed the emergency fund account, the one I'd been transferring money into each month just in case they needed it. I changed my bank passwords, updated the pins, and wrote everything down in a small notebook. I locked in my drawer. When the sun rose fully and light filtered through the curtains, I felt something strange peace. I knew what would happen next. I could almost picture the morning call. Marcus's voice panicked. I imagined them at some fancy brunch spot. The card declined. The waiter awkward, Tasha blushing. At first, they'd assume it was a glitch. Then after trying the second, the third card, the truth would sink in. I didn't want them humiliated. I just wanted them to understand. At 9:15, the phone rang. I looked at the screen, Marcus. I let it ring a few times before answering. Mom. What happened with the cards? All 5 got declined. We're at Season's Bistro with Tasha's mom. People are looking at us like we're scammers. Please call the bank. I took a sip of coffee and said calmly, "The cards aren't broken, Marcus. I canceled them." "What? What do you mean canceled? You can't just—" "I can, and I did. From now on, I'm not funding your life anymore." Silence. Then Tasha's voice came in sharp. "Mom, Angela, we're here with guests. You're making us look ridiculous," I replied. "Sweetheart, sometimes people only understand humiliation after they've made someone else feel it first." I heard Marcus whispering, probably trying to cover the mic. Then, "Mom, not now. Everyone's watching. Then maybe you should leave. Mom, please. We'll talk later. Just reactivate the card for today, okay? We'll pay for lunch, then you can lock it again." I sighed. I've heard just this once, too many times, Marcus. There are no more onces left. I hung up. The house went still. I set the phone down, my hands trembling not from fear, but from adrenaline. The feeling was strange, powerful. I had just broken a 10-year habit, the habit of hurting myself in the name of love. In the kitchen mirror, I caught my reflection, older, wearier, but sharper. Something had shifted. A door had closed, and I knew it wouldn't open easily again. I poured another cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The sky was pale blue. The oak leaves rustled in the breeze. Distant traffic bird song. For the first time in years, I could hear everything clearly. I knew they would come. They would knock, plead, maybe even yell. But that morning, for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't afraid to face them. I felt only one thing: calm. Calm because I had finally chosen to stand on my own side. I knew they would come. I just didn't expect them to come so fast. Not even 2 hours after that call from the restaurant, the sound of a familiar engine stopped at the gate. I sat in the kitchen, looked out the window, and saw the shiny black SUV pull up tight to the walkway, the same car I'd put 15,000 down on, now staring back at me like a symbol of betrayal. Marcus and Tasha got out, both dressed as if they were still on their way home from a lavish lunch. Tasha in a light silk dress, Marcus still in his tie, with the top button undone. Their faces were etched with anger mixed with panic. The knocking came hard and impatient. Mom, open the door, we need to talk. I stayed still. My heart was beating fast, but I wasn't trembling like before. I took a sip of coffee, listening as the knocking turned to pounding. Angela Tasha's voice high and sharp. We know you're in there. Your car's right out front. I stayed silent. For the first time in my life, I let their demands pass through me without reaction. I sat quietly, hearing the sparrows on the porch fold into the hammering on the wooden door. A strange calm settled over me, as if the house itself were shielding me, protecting this precious silence. Mom, please come out. Marcus's voice now sounded tired, tinged with desperation. Tasha's crying. Everyone at the restaurant looked at us like thieves. I don't know how to explain. I closed my eyes and pictured my son's face flushing under the scrutiny of strangers. And for the first time, I felt a kind of justice in my small world. Justice not for revenge, but to teach. When the pounding paused, I stood up, walked to the living room, and eased the curtain back. They were standing by the iron gate, Tasha, with her arms crossed, lips pressed thin. Marcus turned away, hands on his hips. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, only saw Tasha's mouth fluttering fast while Marcus kept shaking his head. I let the curtain fall and went back to my chair, leaving them to drown in the anger they had created. Toward noon, the pounding turned into a ringing phone. I looked at the screen, Marcus. I thought of ignoring it, then answered. Mom, this has gone too far. You think so? I get that you're mad, but canceling all the cards like that humiliated us. Tasha can't even leave the house. She's so embarrassed. Do you want us to be shamed? No, Marcus. I want you to know what it feels like to be disrespected. Silence. I could hear him breathing heavy, sulky, like a stubborn child. Mom, Tasha didn't mean it. She was just joking. Joking about calling your mother a bank and you laughed? I didn't think much of it. Everyone was having fun. You know how young people are. You're 35, Marcus. You're not young people anymore. I raised a man, not a boy. The line went still. I could feel my son swallow across the distance. Then in a smaller voice, he said, I don't want to fight. But you can't just cut everything off like this. I need to pay car insurance. We need groceries. I don't have the money. I let out a sad little laugh. You have a job, Marcus, but my pay only covers. Then you need to learn to live within it. Mom, you don't get it. At my age, people have houses, nice cars, kids. Tasha and I can't live like we're poor, and you choose which kind of poverty, poor in pride or rich on someone else's dime. He exhaled sharply, like I'd slapped his pride. I went on, my voice soft but cutting. Do you know how much I've spent on you in the last 5 years, Mom? $86,000. I counted every line. And in return, what did I get? A joke in front of your friends. Long silence. I heard Tasha whisper something in the background. That's Marcus said. Tasha says, you're acting erratic. Are you sure you're okay? I laughed dry and short. I'm very okay, Marcus. For the first time in 10 years, I'm clear. I hung up. That afternoon, they came back. I was sitting on the back porch when I heard the gate slam. I didn't move, just took a sip of water and waited. Mom, Marcus called sharp with irritation. We can't talk about this over the phone. I didn't answer. After a moment, they came around to the back. Tasha stepped ahead, her heels sinking slightly into the grass, looking both angry and awkward. Angela, she said with a strained smile, we should talk like adults. You can be upset, but money isn't worth destroying a family over. Money doesn't destroy families, Tasha, I said. Greed does. Her eyes flashed. I'm not greedy. I just want to live a life that matches my effort. Your effort or someone else's money. Marcus cut in. That's enough. Mom, don't make this bigger than it is. I turned to my son. I'm not making it bigger. I'm doing what I should have done 10 years ago. The air pulled tight like a string. Two faces I once knew by heart now looked unsettlingly foreign. Tasha clutched her purse. Marcus held her hand, his eyes a mix of pleading and helplessness. Mom, I'm sorry I laughed yesterday. I really am. But don't turn this into a war. There's no war, Marcus. I'm simply withdrawing my troops from your lives. A gust of wind swept a few dry leaves onto the porch. My eyes stung, but no tears fell. Tasha shook her head, her voice trembling with anger. You'll regret this. The whole neighborhood will know you abandoned your own son. You think they'll praise you for it? I looked at her for a long moment. If they know the whole truth, maybe they will. Then I stepped inside and closed the door. The pounding started again, heavier this time, full of fury. I leaned against the wall and listened to their muffled voices outside. Call the police, Marcus. No, they'll say we have no right. It's her house. She's lost her mind. She's clearer than ever. At that, I smiled. Marcus at least still had the capacity to recognize the truth. After nearly an hour, an engine started. I peeked through the curtain and watched them drive away. The lawn was left with two tire tracks like twin welds pressed into memory. I went to my room and opened my finance notebook. On the last line, I wrote, "Today I taught my child his first real lesson about the value of money and respect." I don't know if he understands yet, but I know I've started to live again. That evening, I cooked a simple meal, grilled fish and boiled greens. I ate alone and didn't feel lonely. The house was quiet, the only sound the wind moving the curtains. Every corner seemed to breathe with me, lighter, easier. I turned on the radio. The late night jazz program played Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come. When the melody rose, my throat tightened. Leonard used to love this song. He'd say, "One day you'll have to change because no one else can do it for you." I looked out into the night. The street lamp cast broken patches of light through the trees like an old painting. I knew tomorrow would be hard. There would be more calls, gossip, performative tears. But I also knew I had crossed the greatest fear of my life, the fear of saying enough to the people I love. And from here on, I will never take those two words back. After Marcus and Tasha left, the house fell back into silence, the kind of thick, cottony quiet that felt both warm and suffocating. I sat in the dim afternoon light, listening to the wall clock, marking each second, every tick like a confirmation that I had just stepped into a new chapter of my life. No more calls, no more messages, no more "Mom, could you help me out?" At first, the silence felt hollow, but slowly the emptiness began to fill with other things. The morning bird song, the smell of roasted coffee, the soft sound of water as I tended to my plants. I began to feel alive. 3 days later, I ran into Lucy, my neighbor, two houses down. She was a few years older, short, with salt and pepper curls, bright eyes, and a genuine smile. She came over when she saw me working in the garden. "Angela, I heard some shouting the other day. Everything all right?" I smiled lightly. "Better than ever." Lucy studied me for a moment as if deciding something. Then she said, "I've been there. My two boys thought my pension was an endless fountain until the day I said enough. That day I was terrified and free." Her words struck something deep in me, terrified and free. Yes, both. We sat on the back porch talking for nearly 2 hours about life loss and how love, if left unchecked, can turn into a kind of shackle. Lucy told me she'd started taking small trips just to remember what it felt like to live for herself. "Angela," she asked, "have you ever done something purely because you wanted to, not for anyone else?" I went quiet. That question was like a pin pricking the softest part of my heart. How many years had it been since I lived by choice instead of obligation? I used to dream of going to New Orleans to hear live jazz. I once wanted to learn photography, to grow lavender in my own garden. But those dreams had been buried under bills and endless "Mom, I need." That night, I opened a drawer and unfolded an old list, a small piece of paper I had written long ago in blue ink. See the ocean, hear live music, eat dinner without worrying about money. I read the list over and over and realized none of it was impossible. The next morning, I called the bank to confirm all my accounts were secure. Then I called attorney Coleman, the one who had helped draft my old will. He had a calm, steady voice, the kind of tone that belongs to someone who's witnessed too many families fall apart over money. "I'd like to update my will," I said. "Of course, Mrs. Monroe. What changes would you like to make? I don't want my son to inherit everything anymore. I'd like to divide it, some to a foundation supporting elderly women, some to the community church, some to my sister. As for Marcus, he'll receive his share only when he truly lives independently." Coleman paused for a moment and said, "A wise decision, Mrs. Monroe, not to punish but to teach." I smiled. "Exactly. I don't want revenge. I want a lesson learned." That afternoon, I walked to the little street nearby, the one with the cafe I'd passed 100 times but never entered. Eden Beans. The place was cozy brick walls, glass windows, and a sign that read, "Live Jazz Tonight." I took a seat by the window and ordered a cappuccino and a slice of apple pie. For the first time in years, I didn't check the price before ordering. I watched people passing outside and my eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from release. It felt like fresh air flowing into a room long sealed shut. A small band began to play. The saxophone rose low and tender, echoing across the cafe. The old black musician nodded gently to the rhythm. I closed my eyes, letting the sound move through me, washing away years of fatigue. For a moment, I thought of Leonard, my husband, the man who used to tell me, "Save a piece of life for yourself. Don't give it all away." I'd forgotten that for far too long. When I opened my eyes, I saw Lucy at the door, smiling and waving. "I knew you'd come here," she said. "There's a 3-day cruise leaving Savannah for the Bahamas this Saturday. I've got 2 tickets. Want to come?" I froze, then laughed. "You do realize I've never been on a cruise, right? Then that's what makes the first time worth remembering." Something clicked inside me. I nodded. "Let's go." That night, I went home, opened an old suitcase, brushed off the dust, and started packing. As I folded clothes, I looked around the house, the old photos, the faded curtains, the dining table scarred with years of use. Everything was the same except me. I was no longer afraid of solitude, no longer waiting for the phone to ring. I just felt light, like the air after the storm. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, "Today I began learning how to love myself again. Not the selfish kind of love, but the kind that refuses to let anyone hurt me anymore." I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and listened to the wind outside the porch. Maybe tomorrow would be sunny. The next morning, I woke early and went to the backyard to water the flowers. The first sunlight filtered through the oak leaves, warming my face. I tilted my head up, inhaled the scent of damp earth, and in that moment, I felt truly alive. No longer someone's mother, no longer a name on a credit card, just Angela Monroe, a woman who had once forgotten she deserved happiness. I went back inside and made a cup of coffee. The radio played the morning news, then switched to the music program. The host said, "Sometimes to begin again, you have to admit you've given too much. And that's okay, because from the wreckage, new things grow stronger." I smiled. Maybe the universe was speaking directly to me. That evening, Lucy texted cruise tickets, confirmed packed, that smile, and a comfy pair of sandals. I replied, "Thank you. I'm ready." I set the phone down and sat by the window. Outside, the streetlights were glowing. I watched the golden squares of my neighbors' windows, each one holding a story, a worry, a dream. And I wondered how many mothers out there were sitting in the dark, clutching their wallets, hearts trembling at the thought of saying enough. I wanted to tell them this: saying enough isn't selfish. It's the beginning of freedom. And if you've made it this far, if you've ever seen yourself in my story as a mother, a woman, or someone who forgot her own worth, then type 1 to let me know you're ready to. Ready to stand up, ready to say enough, and ready to start living for yourself. I never thought I'd fall in love with the sea. Maybe because my whole life had smelled of antiseptic, white lights, pale green uniforms, and the steady beeping of hospital monitors. The ocean felt like a luxury, something that belonged to people with free time and full wallets. But when the ship left the port of Savannah, gliding slowly through the gray-blue water, I stood at the railing on the 6th deck, wind whipping my face, and suddenly felt something stir inside me, as if I had just opened the door to a world I'd never dared to touch. Lucy stood beside me, her jacket fluttering gray curls, dancing in the wind. "How do you feel, my friend?" she asked. I smiled, eyes misty. I feel lighter, like all my burdens just fell into the sea. The ship drifted farther out the shore, shrinking into a faint line on the horizon. I watched it fade, feeling as though my past was dissolving with it. The bills, the phone calls, the mocking laughter. They all grew smaller, dimmer, and finally disappeared. Our cabin was small but warm. Lucy was endlessly talkative, the kind of woman who carried light wherever she went, chatting with crew members, complimenting the cook, laughing with strangers. I, on the other hand, just wanted to sit still and listen to the waves striking the hull. That first night, I couldn't sleep. I opened the balcony door and sat there watching the vast black sea stretching endlessly before me. The salty wind brushed against my skin like a blessing. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I prayed not a plea, but a thank you. Thank you, Lord, for giving me the strength to say no. Thank you for not letting me die in silence. The next morning, Lucy dragged me out to the deck for a walk. She pointed at the golden sky. See that every sunrise is proof that you can start over no matter how old you are. I nodded. Her words stayed with me the whole day. That afternoon, we joined a small oil painting class for passengers. The instructor was an old man with silver hair and paint-stained fingers. He handed each of us a small canvas and said, "Don't try to paint something pretty. Paint something true. Put your feelings on the sea." I painted the horizon where the blue of the water met the pale yellow of the sky. And for a brief moment, I realized that the painting was me, the line between fear and freedom, between duty and dream. When the class ended, the old man looked at my painting and nodded. "You just painted the moment you forgave yourself," he said. I blinked. Forgave myself for what? He smiled. For everything. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Forgiveness isn't about excusing others' wrongs. It's about stopping the punishment you've been giving yourself for letting them hurt you for so long." On the third day, the ship docked in the Bahamas. The sky was blazing blue, the water crystal clear, and when my feet touched the sand, I suddenly burst out laughing. A real laugh, loud and unrestrained, the kind that made a few people turn their heads. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like that. Maybe before Leonard died. Lucy took a picture of me. In it, I was standing by the sea dress, fluttering arms raised like a child. She said, "You should print this and hang it in your living room. So when someone asks, you can say this was the day I got my life back." We ate grilled fish and drank coconut water at a little shack on the beach. A reggae tune played through the speakers, slow and joyful. I looked around at the faces, strangers yet warm. No one knew who I was. No one expected me to be a bank or a pillar or a savior. I was just Angela, a brown-skinned woman having lunch in the sun, living in the present. And I felt peace in its simplest, purest form. That evening, I stood on the deck watching the sunset. The sun was a burning orange orb sinking into the sea. I thought of Marcus not with anger, but with a calm tenderness. I knew that if I had kept supporting him, I wouldn't just have been hurting myself. I would have been crippling him too, turning a man into a permanent child. I pulled out my phone and hesitated and typed, "Son, I hope you're doing okay. I don't hate you. I'm just learning to love you the right way." "Mom," I set the phone down without waiting for a reply. Maybe he wasn't ready yet, but that message wasn't meant to fix anything. It was to close the door on bitterness inside me. When the ship returned to land, I felt like someone else stepped off that gangway. My stride was steadier, my back straighter. I didn't think about how much was left in my wallet or who might need something from me. I thought about buying lavender seeds for my garden. Lucy laughed when she saw me holding a souvenir bag. "Told you this cruise would be a baptism for your soul." "You're right," I said. "I've been washed clean of guilt." We hugged before parting. She said, "When you get home, do something symbolic for your new beginning. Get a haircut, maybe." I laughed. Good idea. 2 days later, I did exactly that. I went to a nearby salon and told the young stylist, "Cut it short. I want change." As silver strands fell to the floor, I saw my face grow clearer in the mirror, eyes brighter, smile real. The woman staring back wasn't pretending anymore. She was smiling, the kind of smile that comes from finally believing she deserves simple happiness. That afternoon, I sat on the porch, new hair brushing my neck, the breeze soft against my skin. I brewed tea, opened my journal, and wrote, I've spent most of my life afraid of being alone, of being disliked, of not being a good mother. But it turns out only by losing everything was I able to find myself again. I closed the book and listened to the wind. Somewhere faint laughter of children echoed in the distance, and I thought if Marcus calls one day, I won't yell, I won't cry. I'll just say, I'm here, son, not to pay your debts, but to love you like a real mother should. I smiled. The sea had taught me something. Every wave, no matter how fierce, eventually softens against the shore, like anger, like hurt, like the years of being taken for granted. It all fades, leaving only the shimmer of peace beneath the sun. And in that peace, I finally heard it clearly, quietly. I'm still alive. And this time it's for me. A month after the cruise, my life had grown as calm as a morning lake. Every day I woke before sunrise, brewed coffee, and listened to the local radio. I planted lavender around the back porch, and whenever the wind blew, the scent filled the house, the fragrance of freedom. The days passed quietly, peacefully, so peaceful that sometimes I couldn't believe I had once lived amid so much noise. No more frantic calls, no more pleading voices, no more guilt every time I said no. I learned to savor the smallest details, the bubbling of the kettle sunlight, streaming through the curtains, the coolness of soil beneath my fingers. My life was simple, but within me, every cell was breathing again. Then one Saturday morning, the phone rang. I recognized Marcus's voice. Mom, it's me. His tone was rough, tired, but not with that old hint of desperation. There was something steadier now, something real. I just wanted to tell you not to worry. Tasha and I are okay. We moved into a new apartment. It's small but clean, and we're paying for everything ourselves. I smiled, gazing at the sunlight spilling across the window frame. I'm happy for you, Marcus. I also wanted to thank you. At first, I was angry, thought you were being cruel. But now I get it. You taught me something no one else ever could, how to stand on my own 2 feet. His words made my heart ache, not from sadness, but from a tender mix of pride and wistfulness. He paused and added softly, Tasha wants to apologize. She said if there's a chance, she'd like to speak to you in person. I replied slowly, when you're both sincere, I'll be here. The door's not locked anymore. I just learned to open it more carefully. 2 weeks later, they came. I was cutting flowers in the garden when I heard the sound of a car at the gate. Marcus got out first, then Tasha wearing a simple blouse, no heavy makeup, no towering heels. They walked quietly, without the show of confidence they once wore. When they reached me, Tasha spoke first. Hi, Mom. Her voice was soft, genuine. Thank you for seeing us. I nodded toward the porch. Sit down. The tea's still warm. We sat together in silence for a while. The lavender swayed gently in the breeze. Then Tasha took a deep breath. I'm sorry, not because we lost the money or got embarrassed at that restaurant, but because I forgot you're human. I saw a wallet, not a heart. The words cut like a small, clean blade, sharp but merciful. I looked at her and saw for the first time an honesty in her eyes that wasn't masked by pride. I know I said softly, but what hurt most wasn't the insult, it's that I allowed it to happen for so long. Marcus took Tasha's hand. We'll be different now, Mom. You won't have to worry anymore. I smiled. I never wanted to worry. I just wanted respect. They fell quiet, and then Marcus said, we want to cook you lunch. At our place. Ourselves. I hesitated a moment, then nodded. All right, but I'm bringing dessert? On Sunday, I visited their new apartment. It was small and modest, with the fresh scent of a new beginning walls, newly painted curtains a bit too long. On the table sat a plate of pasta and salad, the aroma gentle and warm. Tasha laughed. No five-star chefs here, just 2 people learning how to live honestly again. We ate together, talking about work, neighbors, little things that had nothing to do with money. And I realized this was what family meant. Not the extravagant dinners, but these quiet meals where everyone looked at one another with sincerity. When it was time to go, Tasha handed me a small envelope. This is our first check to repay you. It's not much, but we want you to know we understand what it's worth. I looked at it, just a few $100, but my hands trembled not because of the amount, but because of the meaning behind it. Keep it, I said gently. I don't need money. I just need you both to remember that every dollar earned honestly carries its own worth. Tasha nodded, eyes glistening. That evening when I got home, the house seemed brighter somehow. I turned on the kitchen light, made myself a cup of mint tea, sat down and opened my journal. I wrote, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's looking back without trembling." I gave up my comfort to reclaim my freedom. I gave up being a savior to become a mother again. I set the pen down and smiled. Inside, something had grown light, like every knot of the past had finally come undone. Outside, the wind passed through the lavender, carrying its scent into the kitchen. I walked to the door and opened it. The small garden shimmered under the moonlight. I thought of Leonard, my late husband, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice in the wind. "You've come home, Angela. At last you've really come home." I looked up at the sky. A shooting star swept across it. I didn't make a wish because everything I needed was already here, resting quietly in this peaceful heart. From afar, the faint bells of the neighborhood church began to chime. I smiled, closed the door, and stepped inside. On the table sat the photograph from the Bahamas, the woman standing in the sea, arms open, dress billowing in the wind. I looked at her for a long time and then whispered, "Thank you, Angela. Thank you for not giving up." Then I turned off the light. The house fell into silence, but this time it was the kind of silence that holds peace, not loneliness. A new chapter of my life had begun, no longer as the one who gives without limits, but as a woman who lives, loves, and forgives, in the wholeness of her own freedom. Autumn returned to the city. The trees lining Peachtree Avenue had begun to turn gold, then burn red in the wind. Atlanta was always at its most beautiful in October. No more scorching heat, just crisp sunlight and the faint scent of dry wood. I loved this season because it felt like me. After all the blazing summers, I only wanted to give off a gentle warmth. This morning I woke earlier than usual. Sunlight glimmered on my coffee cup as the radio announced the weather: clear skies, light rain in the evening. I smiled, perfect weather for planting more lavender. The garden behind my house had become my little world. In the sunlight, the purple blossoms trembled softly, their fragrance delicate and calm. Whenever I touched them, it felt like touching my own peace, the peace I had bought with tears, loneliness, and courage. Lucy came by carrying a basket of warm cookies and her usual bright smile. "Angela, I heard Marcus just got a promotion." I nodded, warmth blooming in my chest. "Yes, he called me last night. He's managing a branch now. I think he's really changed." Lucy sat down in the wicker chair, pouring herself some tea. "See, sometimes love needs a little distance to grow up." I laughed, looking up at the clear blue sky. "Maybe you have to get lost to find your way home." The words came out lightly, but hearing myself say them made my eyes sting. At noon, I received a package, a small envelope labeled "For Mom," from Marcus and Tasha. Inside was a photo of them taken at Piedmont Park, both smiling brightly, holding hands beneath fiery red maples. On the back, written carefully in Marcus's hand, "Thank you, Mom, for teaching us how to live honestly. Love isn't about taking, it's about learning to stand and then turning back to reach out. We love you." I placed the photo on the mantel beside Leonard's picture. I whispered, "You see that, Lenny? Our boy finally grew up." In the afternoon, the rain came. Autumn rain in Georgia always arrives, suddenly pours hard, then drifts away. I sat by the window listening to the drops against the roof, the smell of wet earth seeping into the room. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. All my life I had lived for others. But now, living for myself, I'd never felt closer to people. When duty no longer binds you, love finally returns to its pure form, gentle, willing, unforced. I opened my journal to a fresh white page and wrote, "This autumn I learned how to love without fear of loss. I learned how to give without expecting anything back. And I understood sometimes to keep those we love, we must be brave enough to let them go." I closed the book and looked out at the rain. As it faded, a small rainbow peeked from behind the houses. The light hit my window and scattered across the table, shimmering like 1,000 tiny blessings. That evening, I made a simple dinner lentil soup and toasted bread. Just as I set the table, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. Marcus stood there, shirt damp from the rain, holding a small bouquet. Mom, I didn't call ahead. I just wanted to stop by. I was surprised, but my heart lifted. Come in, honey. It's raining. He stepped inside and laid the flowers on the table. The scent of roses mixed with the soup's warmth, filling the house with comfort. Tasha's at her night class, he said quietly. I thought you wouldn't mind if I joined you. I chuckled. Of course not. I still cook an extra portion, old habits die hard. We ate together, not saying much, but it was peaceful. No awkwardness, no guilt. Just a mother and her son sharing food and quiet understanding. After dinner, Marcus said softly, I know you changed my life, Mom, but maybe what I'm most grateful for isn't the money you gave me. It's the moment you stopped. Because that's when I learned how to earn, how to keep, and how to value things. I looked at him, my heart full, and I had to relearn how to love Marcus. Not the kind of love that swallows someone whole, but the kind that knows when to stop. He smiled, his eyes bright, with something I hadn't seen in a long time, hope. When Marcus left, the rain had stopped completely. I stood on the porch watching his car disappear down the wet street, the taillights glowing red like ribbons on the pavement. I knew this time he wouldn't come back for help, he'd come back for love. Inside, I turned off most of the lights, leaving just one glowing in the living room. The scent of roses mingled with lavender in the air, a fragrance I wanted to remember forever. Before bed, I looked around my small house, once a symbol of loneliness, now a monument to the quiet strength of self-respect. I whispered, if someone asked me the secret to peace at this age, I'd say be brave enough to lose what doesn't belong to you so you can keep what does yourself. I turned off the light, lay down, and listened to the soft wind outside the window. In the dark, I smiled, not the smile of someone who's won, but of someone who's finally come home. The next morning, I woke just as dawn broke. The sparrows chirped on the roof, sunlight slipped through the curtains. I made coffee, opened the window, and inhaled deeply. The lavender scent lingered, light, steady, and tender, reminding me that peace doesn't arrive once. It returns every day if you know how to keep it. I placed my hand over my heart, feeling its steady warmth. Inside, there was no resentment, no fear, only gratitude. Grateful for the pain because it had taught me how to live. And I whispered to myself, every season has its reason for being, and the season of peace has finally come. That winter came earlier than usual. The wind from the north slipped through every crack in the house, carrying a chill that lingered on my skin. I had prepared myself for a quiet season, warm blankets, ginger tea, and the unfinished Toni Morrison novel resting on my bedside table. But life always knows how to knock when you think you've finally found peace. One Friday morning, as I was sweeping leaves in the yard, the mail carrier stopped at the gate. Letter for you, Mrs. Monroe, he said, handing me a yellowed envelope with crumpled corners. No return address, just two words. From Chicago. I sat on the wooden bench and opened it, my hands trembling slightly. Inside was a sheet of paper, handwriting slanted and achingly familiar. My heart stopped. Leonard. It was Leonard's writing. Angela. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone by now. I know I wasn't always good at saying the things I should have said while I was alive. I worry about you because you've always lived for everyone but yourself. I've left a small account in Chicago with my personal savings, not much, but enough for you to do something you've always put off. Use it to go somewhere you've never dared to go. Don't just live. Live for yourself. Love, Lenny. The paper quivered in my hands. My tears fell blurring the ink. I didn't know why the letter had taken so long to reach me. Maybe it had been lost or someone in his family had found it and decided to send it now. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that it arrived at the exact moment I was finally ready to hear it. I looked out at the winter-shadowed garden. Leonard had always known me too well. He once told me I'd always find excuses to postpone my own joy. There were no excuses left now. That afternoon, I called Lucy. Lucy, do you remember telling me I should do something bold before it's too late? Of course, she laughed. Why, what are you thinking? I think I'm going to New Orleans. There was a brief pause, then her voice burst into delighted laughter. I knew it. You always light up whenever jazz comes on. I laughed too. Leonard once promised he'd take me there. He never got the chance. Maybe now I'll go for both of us. Lucy agreed to come along. We booked a night train for the following week straight from Atlanta. I didn't tell Marcus or Tasha, not out of secrecy, but because I wanted this trip to be mine alone, a response to the man who'd once taught me how to love life. The day we left, the air was cold and drizzly. The station bustled with people, steam clouding the platforms. I stood beside Lucy, clutching my small suitcase, feeling as giddy as a 20-year-old girl. I can't believe I'm actually doing this, I said, laughing through my nerves. Lucy laid a hand on my shoulder. Sometimes courage is just stepping onto the train while your heart is still scared. The train pulled away. The city lights slipped behind us, swallowed by the dark. I rested my head against the window, listening to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the rails like the steady beat of a heart. And in the rush of wind, I could almost hear Leonard's whisper, "You're finally going, Angela." I smiled. New Orleans greeted us in a misty dawn, a city both old and alive, pulsing with the sound of jazz from every corner. The yellowed walls, the aroma of roasted coffee, the saxophone drifting from a cafe. It was all a symphony of freedom. Lucy grinned. "First stop, the French Quarter. I want to see you dance," I laughed. "Lucy, I'm 69. Then you have to dance." We joined the crowd, street performers, strangers clapping and spinning under the morning sun. When the band began, "What a Wonderful World," my throat tightened. Leonard had loved that song. I closed my eyes, letting the melody wash over me. Without thinking, my feet began to move, not gracefully but honestly. Lucy grabbed my hand, laughing loud. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of horns and tambourines, I felt Leonard there, not in body, but in the gentle presence that lingered in every note. That night, Lucy and I sat on the hotel balcony overlooking Bourbon Street, lights flickering below. I poured 2 glasses of red wine. To Leonard, I said. Lucy raised her glass, and to the woman who had the courage to begin again. We clinked glasses. The wine burned slightly as it went down, warm alive. Below us, laughter and music filled the street's life in full swing. And I understood freedom isn't leaving the past behind. It's smiling when you look back at it. Under the golden lamplight, I opened my small notebook and wrote, "Life is strange. When we're young, we think love means giving without condition. When we grow older, we think it means sacrifice. But only when we truly know ourselves do we learn love is what lets both people be free." I closed the notebook and looked down at the street. An elderly couple walked hand in hand, their shadows blending into the glittering light. I smiled. Tomorrow, I'll walk along the Mississippi River, where Leonard once dreamed of standing at sunset. I'll bring his letter, and maybe I'll let it drift away on the current. Not to forget, but to say goodbye at last. Because I finally understand only when the past finds rest can the present truly live. The next morning, I woke early. The sunrise painted the old buildings along the Mississippi in shades of gold, and the smell of roasted coffee drifted up from a cafe below, carried by the wind. This city had a pulse, something wild yet tender, like the heartbeat of someone who had known loss but still remembered how to smile. Lucy was still asleep. I left a note on the table, went to the river. Don't worry. Wrapping a light scarf around my neck, I slipped Leonard's letter into my coat pocket. Outside, the air was crisp, the river mist curling like smoke from old memories. I walked slowly along the levee, my footsteps mingling with the soft lap of waves. Tourist boats drifted by, leaving behind trails of silver foam. I stopped at a quiet stretch of riverbank where an old wooden bench faced the water. Sitting down, I took a deep breath. The wind brushed against my sleeve, and for a fleeting moment I felt Leonard there, not in body, but in the rhythm of the air and the stillness that held me. I pulled out the letter. The paper was wrinkled now, the ink blurred by tears. I read it again, and this time I didn't cry. "Don't just live, live for yourself." Those words echoed like a bell reaching the deepest part of me. I whispered, I did it, Lenny. I lived for me, and because of that, I found you again. I folded the letter carefully, pressed a kiss to its edge, and stood. The sunlight shimmered on the river's surface. I stepped closer to the water and opened my hand. The small sheet lifted into the wind, touched the river, and began to dissolve, spinning, then slowly disappearing among the waves. I watched until it vanished, then closed my eyes. There was no pain left, only gratitude. I stayed for a long time listening to the sound of seagulls and the music of the current. The sun climbed higher, lighting the whole wide river, and I could almost feel Leonard smiling somewhere in that light. When I returned to the hotel, Lucy was awake, a pot of coffee ready on the table. She looked at me, smiling softly. It's done, isn't it? I nodded. It's done. He's gone, and I've let go too. She took my hand, and we said nothing more. Some silences carry more comfort than words ever could. We spent the next 2 days wandering through New Orleans, sipping coffee at a little cafe, on Royal Street, listening to blues in a dim bar, buying souvenirs for the neighbors back in Atlanta. But through all of it, I carried a strange lightness, as if my heart had been lifted and set free. Its beats were steady now, unburdened. When the train back to Atlanta pulled away, I looked out the window as the city faded behind a veil of mist. Golden light streamed through the glass like honey. Goodbye, Lenny, I whispered. Thank you for giving me the courage to live the rest of my life. Lucy chuckled. Who are you talking to? To the man who taught me that real love means knowing when to let go. Back in Atlanta, my little house was unchanged, but I was not. I hung a new painting in the living room, a copy of the one I'd made on the cruise, a horizon of blue and gold where sky met water. Beneath it, I wrote a small inscription, for Leonard, for freedom. Each morning, when sunlight touched the frame, I felt alive again, as if that river still flowed inside me, carrying away the weight of yesterday, leaving only clarity behind. One afternoon in March, Marcus called. Mom, we're coming by this weekend. Tasha wants to bring baby Emma to meet you. Baby Emma. My heart skipped a grandchild. Marcus's voice was bright and boyish like years ago. Of course, sweetheart, I said. I'll bake an apple pie. After hanging up, I looked out at the garden. The lavender had bloomed again, painting the porch in soft purple. I smiled. The circle had closed from a mother who'd been used to a woman who reclaimed her freedom and now a grandmother learning to love the right way. That weekend when Marcus, Tasha, and little Emma arrived, the house filled with laughter. Tasha brought the baby to me. Mom, this is Emma. I looked at the tiny face, the deep dark eyes, just like her father's once were. Emma wrapped her fingers around mine and giggled. In that moment, I knew every tear, every lonely night, every year of silence had led me here, to this new beginning, this new generation. Hello, Emma, I whispered. The first thing Grandma will teach you is this. Love never means losing yourself. That night after they left, I sat on the porch. The air was cool and scented with lavender. I leaned back in my old wooden chair, gazing up at the starry sky. And in the quiet, I could almost hear the Mississippi again, the endless rush of water carrying away everything old, everything heavy into the sea. I murmured to myself, every river finds the ocean eventually, and every soul its peace. I closed my eyes, no tears, no regret, only a calm breath and a quiet smile. Tomorrow, I'll start writing it all down, not to tell a story of pain, but a story of crossing through it. Because somewhere out there, another mother is still sitting in silence, not yet knowing that the moment she says enough, she's already begun to save herself. I placed a hand over my heart, feeling its steady rhythm, the sound of someone who has come home after the storm. Then in a whisper meant for the old world and the new, I said, I have forgiven, and I have lived. Looking back, I realize the hardest thing in life isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself for letting your heart be hurt for so long. I once believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a mother meant enduring, but now I understand love isn't about giving until you're empty. It's about learning to keep a piece of yourself safe. If you're hearing my story today and somewhere in your heart it feels familiar, the feeling of being overlooked, used, or forgotten, then remember this: it is never too late to begin again. The moment you dare to say enough, the world will open a new door for you, just as it did for me. I am no longer the bank called mom. I am Angela Monroe, a woman who has learned to love without hurting herself. And if this story has touched even the smallest corner of your heart, leave a comment and share what you feel, because your words might become the strength someone else needs to stand up again. Don't forget to give this story a like if you saw a piece of yourself in it, and follow this channel to keep walking with me through more journeys of healing, stories of resilience, of love, and of freedom. I'm Angela Monroe, and thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. Be gentle with yourself, my friend, because you deserve peace, just like I have found mine.